First of all, I'm really happy to be here. I'm very honored for this opportunity. It's really great to be back in the city of Long Beach. I lived in Long Beach for several years. I'm a graduate of Long Beach State. Right? Yes, electrical engineering back in 1990 before the pyramids were built. So students often look at me a little funny when I say that. Anyways, I want to start out by first thanking several folks here, including the Mayor, Mayor Robert Garcia, members of the Long Beach City Council, City Manager Pat West, and the Innovation Summit Committee for holding this event. And I think this is really representative of the culture of sustainability and innovation that Long Beach has, you know, utilizing technologies for the betterment of the community and the public. So Edison, it's very aligned with Edison's view of the future in terms of providing safe, reliable, affordable, and clean energy for our customers. So very honored to be here. And the purpose of my presentation is really about the future of energy and really taking a historical look as well as a future look in terms of where we've been and where we're headed. So just some factoids for folks who are history buffs. You know, we see a lot of electric vehicles on the road today, and plug-in electric vehicles are really proliferating on our system. The first electric car, I would say the first successful American electric car was built back in 1891. And interestingly, it was a 6-passenger vehicle built by William Morrison. It went about, I think, estimated 14 miles an hour. It was rechargeable. And so if you think about where we are today, the idea and the innovation that occurred to spark the idea of an electric car occurred really well long ago. And the first American race was actually won by an electric car. So if you fast forward to today, you know, it really is reflecting back on where history started. I was actually doing a little bit of math. I've been with Edison Company for 25 years, and when I think about 130 years ago, I was, interesting to say, I was representing 20% of that time. So anyways, a little bit of time has passed. I also want to mention that Edison built the first electric power plant in New York in 1882. It was a relatively small plant. It energized about 82 customers and 400 lights, or 400 lamps. So when you think about the beginning of the electric system, it really started off as a microgrid, and you hear that term in sort of advanced technology today. But microgrids are really connected across the US for purposes of reliability and cost efficiency. So Edison's plant, it started off in 1882, but in a matter of 2 years, it was expanded to serve up to 500 customers and over 10,000 lamps. And during this period of time, what was interesting is there was really a pretty significant debate going on as to whether energy should be produced by alternating current, which is what we have today, or DC. So Edison pushed for DC power, and Westinghouse pushed for AC. And this debate went on for quite a while, and there's advantages and disadvantages of each one. One of the shortcomings of DC power was it was really difficult to transmit that over long distances. And one of the potential issues around AC power, and Edison tried to push this, was the safety issues around high voltage AC. Ultimately, AC won the battle, and Nikola Tesla was the founder of the induction machine, which is really the workhorse of industry and the power system today. So when I think about how the electric system began, and really this debate is somewhat interesting when you think about consumer electronics today. A lot of the devices that we use are powered by DC, a lot of conversion from AC to DC. So it's really interesting when we think about history and how that debate had started to begin with. So in 2003, the National Academy of Engineers put out a document called Innovation in the 20th Century. And they looked at what are the most significant engineering advancements of the 20th century. So there's a lot of competition in that. When you think about the automobile, the airplane, the internet, the cell phone, I mean, there's this significant amount of engineering achievement that has occurred in the 20th century. The number one on the list was electrification. And the reason for that is given by the National Academy of Engineers is that electrification is really the workhorse of the modern world. And can I kind of sit back and think about what does that mean? It really is an enabling technology. It enables all these other things to have proliferated in the 20th century. So it's really an interesting look at history. And when I look at the electric system today, it's worthwhile to take, well, how does the system overall look at Southern California Edison? So Southern California Edison has a pretty significant network, and it's really divided into three parts. There's generation, because energy has to be manufactured. We have to transmit that, so we have very high voltage towers, 220 up to 500 kV to transmit power over relatively long distances, and a distribution system that provides power to all of our customers. So when we think about the system and how massive that is of an infrastructure, 103,000 miles of conductor. And when you break that apart into transmission and distribution, transmission really represents about 13,000 miles, and 90,000 of that is distribution. And if you think about how much conductor that is, it's really enough to wrap itself around the Earth about 3.5 times. So if you think about just a lot of time lapse when you think about the availability of energy across the country and building it to a point where we can turn on the light switch, and everybody has energy available, it's quite an achievement. So this is really what I kind of consider the traditional electric system, and this system is undergoing to go quite a bit of transformation. And it's largely driven by Edison's focus. We are kind of a wires-focused company, if you want to think of it that way. We own less than 20% of the generation to supply all the energy needs for a population of nearly 15 million people. But the system itself, I think, even though it took a while to build the system out over the course of time, it's really undergoing substantial transformation. And I think there's policy objectives, there's technology really pushing for clean energy integration. And so we all are familiar with all of these technologies. Just to give you a sense of how much we're seeing on the system today, plug-in electric vehicles, we have about 70,000 today, but we're forecasting that to increase to about 197,000 within 2 years. So that's pretty significant. Energy storage. So the picture just below the car is a picture of what a potential energy storage facility would look like. We take the same technology in the car and the batteries and you put that into a building. And really the purpose of energy storage, when you think about things like solar and wind, the renewable resource isn't always there. So the concept behind storage is to store the energy when it's generated and be able to use it when you need it. And Edison has procured about just over 350 megawatts of energy storage, which is about enough to power about 60,000 homes. Solar is proliferating on the system. We're really glad to see that. And if you think about just how many residential rooftop installations we have in our service territory today, it's about 190,000. We average about 5,000 applications a month. And I talked to a number of companies throughout the US and utility companies to sort of compare, certainly California is significantly in the lead on this front. Other companies are watching what's happening in California very carefully because it is really about transformation happening here in this state. So all of this is really transforming how energy is used. Customers have a lot more options available to them to be able to do things a little bit differently, how to manage their energy uses, how to save money. But what does that look like on the electric system? So electric system itself is undergoing some transformation. And we're really, if you kind of go back to that diagram that I have of the traditional system, you can envision power in essence flowing one way, flowing from central generation through transmission customers. What we see today is a little bit of variation of that, and power flowing in both directions. So this really represents more of an integration and an integrated grid, where we see not just providing power to customers, but a lot of connections to the system itself. So electric vehicles, solar, energy storage, and even home automation and those kinds of things are really, in our minds, going to drive the system of the future. So when we think about how the system got started and where we are today, there's a lot of innovation that needs to occur relatively quickly because the proliferation of, and the need to move to a clean energy environment is immediate. It's here. And so just to give a little bit of view as to what the system is looking like in the future, I do have a short video for you to watch.
Southern California Edison is ready to turn the power grid into a modern and cutting-edge power network. To get there, it helps to know where we started. The electric power grid is a story of wires. Wires connecting large generation plants like nuclear, fossil fuel, hydro, and renewables to where we need it most, our cities and communities. This power grid was designed with one-way power flow, where electricity generated by large power producers radiates outward over our system to where it is consumed. This system, though efficient at distributing power, is limited in its ability to receive it. Now, rooftop solar generation on homes and businesses, as well as new energy efficiency technologies, energy storage, and electric vehicles, are changing the way electricity gets produced, distributed, and used. With these technologies, Southern California Edison's customers continue to rely on the electric grid, but in new ways, sometimes buying power, sometimes selling power, and sometimes switching between the two without a moment's notice. To enable this power network, we will be developing and deploying specialized equipment allowing this two-way flow of power and communications. The goal is to capture more data on the grid than ever before, then use that data to plan and operate the grid intelligently. In doing so, make it easy for our customers to choose renewable and sustainable energy technologies for their homes and businesses, which will also help California reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
So I often get a question around the change that we're seeing. How fast is this going to take? Or how long is it going to take? How fast do we have to go? And our belief is that the grid is, because it's a massive amount of infrastructure, we do need to begin that journey now. And we already are in many different ways. So I put some examples up here in terms of some of the recent and emerging projects that Edison has started. And I'm going to really close with, how many more opportunities do we have that I'm not covering here? We had a great presentation on the Port of Long Beach, and we've been working with the port on expanding the electrification, and we see many, many opportunities for technology and innovation to occur there at the port, and we're very excited about, taking advantage of that. We also are interested in encouraging more adoption of electric vehicles. When you think about greenhouse gas reduction, transportation sector represents a really significant portion of the overall goal to incrementally make a way into reducing emissions. So we have launched an initiative called Charge Ready, and the purpose of that is to build the infrastructure for commercial charging stations. We have approval to install up to 15 of the infrastructure needed to support charging stations, with the vision of going up to 30,000. We're also introduced, a way to how to bring resources to provide some of the functions that you would normally expect to see in the power system today. So all of us are familiar with the decommissioning of our San Onofre nuclear station. The nuclear station represented a significant energy source for Southern California, and we had to respond relatively quickly with transmission infrastructure to bring more power into our load centers within the absence of having a nuclear station. But what happens over time is with the economy and increasing demand, growth continues. And so one of the concerns we had was, how do we avoid, or could we avoid, building additional gas-fired generation in the area to meet increasing demand growth? So we took on a pilot project called the Preferred Resources Pilot, where we wanted to solicit as many what we call preferred resources, which are things like solar storage, energy efficiency, and demand response, to test and measure whether or not these resources could, in essence, level the future demand growth that we would see on the system, so we would avoid ultimately having to build additional generation. So that is a pilot that's currently underway. It looks like we're, really working hard and trying to figure out, what we can learn from that, and procuring enough resources I think we have for a few years today. But the journey is really just beginning. And when we think about the future of innovation, I'm really interested, and I wish I can sit in conversations around what the possibilities are. From an energy standpoint, there's a lot of things that we could do, from empowering customers to adopt these technologies. How do we train our workforce of the future? What kinds of jobs do we see coming into the state as a result of more and more clean energy integration? How do we build resiliency and reliability as we get more renewables onto the system? And how do we build out the information infrastructure? And I sort of boil this down into 3 buckets. The first one is promotion of clean energy transportation. I say that as really an example. It's a convergence of the electric sector with the transportation sector. But there are other convergences that are happening today. We also see a convergence of electricity and gas. We see a convergence of water conservation and energy conservation. So we see that all these things could potentially converge in the spirit of being more sustainable. The second bucket of that is building smart infrastructure. And we're all very interested in what is the right infrastructure to build and how does it work together. So if there are projects in cities and communities and we have a need to, say, replace our aging infrastructure, how do we do so in such a way that we can take advantage and leverage each other for building the right infrastructure that can benefit the communities that we serve? And I think lastly and most importantly is connecting information and people. I mean, I think this event is a really great example of how people can come together to exchange ideas. We've already started some of this and really excited with some of the discussions we've had with the City of Long Beach about, we're at really the cusp of an opportunity here, and I always ask the question, how long is this opportunity going to be here? Is this a ship that is moving into dock now and we really have to take advantage of it before things kind of move on? I really believe that this is a window of opportunity that we have across multiple sectors to come together. So I would really like to think that 50, 100 years from now, people can look back at this time to really say, the future is here now. It's not something that is going to occur, 10, 20 years. We do fundamentally believe that we're going to see more change in the next 10 years than we've seen in the last 100. So I'm really excited. I think this is a tremendous opportunity for multiple players, multiple stakeholders, utilities, communities, cities alike, to really think about what the future holds. Thank you very much.